The game of old school RuneScape now has dozens of bosses with levels topping out at 1520. It wasn't always like this though. Let me take you guys back in time to September 24th, 2002. The RuneScape website was a shell of what it is now, but for the time was seen as pretty innovative and had a ton of options and information available. During my research, I actually managed to find the RuneScape homepage, a version of it from 2002, on release day of the King Black Dragon. Just by reading this post, it says you'll have to find it first. This was very interesting to me and was probably the most interesting thing about this post, was that they didn't just give you the location that the monster was, you had to actually go hunt for it. And of course, this was RuneScape Classic, so of course when KBD was ported from RuneScape Classic to RS2, people already knew where it was. I'm really curious to know if there was some big hunt for the KBD and people got together in parties and looked for this new boss. I really want to hear from some of you guys that played Classic from its inception on how this went. Did it go this way, or did they eventually tell you, where the boss was? I'm very curious about this. Normally I'd be able to find information like this myself, but this goes back almost 19 years. So information on this is very hard to find. If you were really focused on the KBD update post on the website back from 2002, you also notice it came with another iconic piece of content, the tutorial island. I had no idea the two shared the same update, so that was also pretty interesting. This would see the first piece of dragon armor be released into RuneScape, an iconic milestone for sure. You already had weapons such as the Dragon Battle Axe, also known as the Dragon Axe back in RuneScape Classic days, as well as the Dragon Sword. But there was no piece of dragon armor, so this was highly sought after. The KBD at the time also had the most common drop rate for the Dragon Medium Helmet. This is in stark contrast to the other three monsters that dropped it upon release. These monsters were the Fire Giant, the Black Dragon, and the Black Demon. Whereas the KBD drop rate was just over 1 out of 100, the other drop rates were well over 1 out of 1,000. And oftentimes many players would have to kill thousands of these to even have a chance of seeing the Dragon Medium Helmet. This made the KBD well worth killing. Even by today's standards, it has one of the most common drop rates for the helmet, although it is valued nowadays at much less, at around high alchemy price being 60k. Finding the Dragon Med Helm price data upon release was nearly impossible. I couldn't find an accurate number. Before RuneScape Classic's closing, it was said to go for anywhere between 1 and 2 million. You guys will have to confirm that in the comments. If any of you guys are true OGs and played in 2002, around September when this was released, maybe you could help your boy out and drop the price of the Dragon Med in the comments. Now on to the King Black Dragon's combat level and some of its mechanics in Classic. So one key difference between the RuneScape Classic version of the King Black Dragon and the old school version that we know today is the combat levels were different. Many people don't know this or don't care enough to pay attention. The RuneScape Classic's King Black Dragon was level 245, whereas on old school it's level 276. However, having said this, there is no argument that the RuneScape Classic version of the King Black Dragon was much harder than the old school counterpart. Allow me to explain real quick and run this down. RuneScape Classic had a 3-hit combat cycle mechanic, which means if you ran into an aggressive monster and it attacks you, you had to sit there for at least 3 hits. You could sit there for 4 or 5 and then kind of run away, but if it caught you again, you'd be stuck for 3 hits. So minimum 3-hit combat every combat cycle. And this of course carried over to the King Black Dragon. The only difference is, even with the anti-dragon shield, the KBD could still melee you for 25s. That means if you were immensely unlucky, you could be hit for 3 25s within 1 combat cycle, totaling in at 75 hit points. Also, very few players had 99 hit points, so they're probably floating around the mid 80s to 90, so that would almost kill them. And let's say they screwed up when they were running away and eating, because you couldn't eat on RuneScape Classic while you were in that 3 combat hit cycle. You had to retreat a set number of squares while eating and trying to avoid the thing from getting on you again, all without dying. More skilled players on RuneScape Classic would do a tactic where they had the anti-dragon shield for the first hit of every 3-hit combat cycle, and then they would quickly switch to either a rune kite shield, or the way more advanced players would have a dragon square shield, which wasn't out upon release, so it was all about the rune kite at the time. To build off what I was saying earlier about the 3-hit combat and the small margin of error you had, If you lagged or disconnected, you could just consider yourself dead. This thing was extremely deadly. Another cool little fact is during the fight you could bring a buddy if they were using mage or range. Of course, I don't think you'd want to use range because from what I researched at the time, range levels got drained for each attack or something to that effect. But to wrap up the RuneScape Classic KBD, it was the pinnacle of PvM for RuneScape Classic, and really, not counting quest bosses, it was really the only boss within the game. If you could kill this at the time on RuneScape Classic, you were seen as an extremely good PvMer and a very strong player. Let's hop forward a little more than 2 years and go straight into RuneScape 2. Naturally, as we get into RS2, King Black Dragon, not counting quest bosses, was also RuneScape 2's first actual boss. And because of this reason and because of the way things worked with the porting of content from RuneScape Classic to RuneScape 2, naturally the King Black Dragon's drop table just came over to RuneScape 2. So at the time, they had an almost identical drop table because of this reason. And naturally, as time went on, these drop tables would differ more and more simply due to updates. A few months after the fact, you had clue scrolls come out. This added the level 3 or hard clue scrolls to the King Black Dragon's drop table. On May 31st of 2006, the KBD heads were added to the KBD drop table. This allowed players to mount the KBD head as a trophy and mount it within their house. And moving right along the timeline, on June 18th of 2007, the KBD saw another addition to its drop table with the Draconic Visage and the release of the Dragon Fire Shield. This replaced the D-Med as the most valuable drop you could get off the King Black Dragon, which upon release totaled in at over 30 million. After this, the next addition would be the Dragon Pickaxe. This happened on March 13th of 2014. It was only a few mil, and at the time, sadly, it was almost on par with what a Draconic Visage was worth, as the Draconic Visage would see a massive price fall around this time and still continues to fall. And on old school RuneScape, the most recent changes to the drop table includes the Prince Black Dragon, which is probably one of the most sought after things you can get off of KBD now, as it is 1 out of 3,000 and is very rare. As far as the boss fight goes, even upon release it was seen as much easier than its RuneScape Classic counterpart. This was also due to the fact that the whole layer was multi-combat, and this worked much differently than how RuneScape Classic worked, where you could have a meleeer and then a ranger or major. In this, it didn't matter. You could all melee, you could bring 10 people, 20 people, and just pile onto it. In addition, the 3-hit combat cycle was no longer a thing on RuneScape 2, which also made this boss easier, although on this version of the game it was given 3 different attacks. A combat stat draining attack, a poison attack, and a freezing attack, as well as, your typical regular dragon fire attack, so I guess that makes 4, and it still retained its melee hit with a max hit of 25, just like in RuneScape Classic. Unlike in RuneScape Classic, the anti-dragon shield actually had to be worn at all times and you couldn't do any sort of shield swapping, unless you wanted to run the risk of taking damage totaling in at around 65. Also, because I like you guys, let me inform you of a little lure that happens here. Let's say you're killing KBD in a non-instance. Instances were added, by the way, for 25k GP. If you don't use an instance, you might have like a newbie looking character come up and you feel sorry for him and he might ask to kill KBD with you, and he's not going to get any of the drops. It's usually like a very low level with crappy gear. And he chats you up, acts real friendly, and then says, hey, do you use a looting bag? And if you say yes, then he'll ask you to go outside and demonstrate to him how it works, because he's a noob. If you do that, a max mage team is going to be waiting at the spiders, because as many of you know, you have to go in the wilderness to use the looting bag, which requires you to pull the lever and go out to the poison spiders. Normally this wouldn't be an issue, because if it's 1 or 2 PKers, the spiders will usually get on them and you have a chance to, pull the lever before they even have a chance of attacking you. But with a max mage team, they usually clear or attack all the spiders, and at least one of them is free to teleblock you and lock you out there with them. If this doesn't work, if you say no to them, or just don't do it, or just say you don't have a looting bag, then he'll just befriend you, and he's acting like a super cute noob and offers to go on another trip with you. And if you take him, he teleports in first and tells you the coast is clear. You teleport in with your burning amulet behind him, and the same team that would have been there the first time is there again at the burning amulet spot, but this time your friend is there and he says, oh, box me in order to get away from these guys. And like me and you box him, you're going to get skulled, but if you panic in the moment, you might do it, You skull with your Zami Hasta or Dragon Hunter Lance or whatever you use on modern day OSRS. And you're skulled and they're going to get you. They're going to get your stuff. That max mage team's going to get on you. Your friend is going to get off. Your so-called friend anyways. But yeah, watch out for that one. So it's kind of new. It's a few years old. I've seen it happen a few times. Like all bosses that have been out for a while, like KBD is a product of its time. When it first came out in Classic, it was the hardest challenge. Progressing into RS2, it became a little easier, but still kind of annoying because all you had was Dragon Longswords, Dragon Battle Axes, and, you know, subpar gear. Fast forward to nowadays with Twisted Bows, Enchanted Bolts, and Dragon Hunter Lances, this thing is quite easy to steamroll. But all in all, the KBD was hugely popular for its time in the sun. It created many memories that will likely outlive the game itself. It is still heavily killed for Slayer as well as that snazzy new pet. For content that is 19 years old, it's impressive it stayed active for this long. And that's gonna about do it for me, guys. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. I know it's gonna be a little bit shorter than normal, but I hope you enjoy it nonetheless. And yeah, I truly appreciate all the support you guys have given me on the new direction of the channel. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.